And here's Foster Hirsch.
Isn't 3D great?
I like you. I like you to expand a little bit on
Yes.
what you said at the beginning about Hitchcock not wanting to take the film out of a room. He picked specifically the stage play because he thought the medium of 3D could be very effective in a confined space.
In a
Can
conf-
you, yeah, can
in
you,
3D in a confined space. Hitchcock made the point that when you go to the theater, you're seeing the space in 3D. And when you're in film, it's flat. So he wanted to take a theatrical setting, and it's a play, of course. I think it was done at Bay Street Theater last summer. Am I right about that? It was. Yeah. Did it work? Yeah, it's a very ingenious play. So Hitchcock wanted to have the theatrical space on film, and then he wanted to layer it the way it's layered in the theater. So did you notice how there's always something
in
in the
front?
front? The lamps, a gate, a curtain. Did you notice all of that? And then there's something behind it, and then there's something behind that. There's sometimes three or four spaces. And 3D is not just about projection. People who saw the film in 54 said, oh, he's not using 3D correctly. To the contrary, he used it exactly right. Because 3D is not just about throwing things out at you, although I love that. I love to duck in 3D. But 3D is also about depth. And this film is a study in depth and layering of a kind that is really experimental. I don't know of any other film that is such an experimental use of 3D. It may seem conservative, but it's just the opposite.
I agree. And going back to what you were just saying, I think some of the other treaties that predate, between 51, this is 54, were much more like taking advantage in a more obvious way of the third dimension, like arrows coming at you, charge at
Yes.
Feather River, the scares. And this one is very subtle, and it's really through setting. And so it really shows how Hitchcock studied 3D, didn't take it lightly.
No, he didn't take it lightly. He took it as a great technical challenge, and he realized that to get the sense of depth, you have to put something in the front of the image. Hence the furniture. Every object in this film takes on a kind of illuminated presence. The objects in this room, I've seen this film so many times, I can recite the dialogue along with the characters, and I like it every time. But the objects really become as prominent as the characters. Those objects are very key compositionally. So the desk and the chair, did you notice the I'm not supposed to say the Oriental figure, the Asian
Yeah.
figure? Uh, all the figures take on a kind of presence in 3D and with a sharpness and clarity
And
that
it's
are
the same for
stunning.
the use of light, the way that what it lights, what it lights and what it doesn't, whether it's light or where it doesn't.
Yes.
The light even itself has volume,
It does. The light has volume. I love the way he uses the bedroom in deep focus. And then we get just the one shot of the kitchen with those ominous bars and gates. I mean, and notice how small the space is in the film. We never see the entire room. These people have money, but they seem to live in a space that's about this big here. We never see a dining table. We never see the whole room.
Yeah.
So we're just working in this really confined space, which he charges with such intensity. I've rarely seen space used in such a charged way in any movie, but it works magnificently in 3D.
Yes.
And you were a wonderful audience. You were spellbound by 3D, and you applauded vigorously at the end. Good for Sag Harbor.
Another thing that's interesting, which I hadn't noticed the last time I saw the film, and I didn't remember it at least, is the use of color. And the brighter colors, her dresses, her clothes, and her, makeup going from bright and happy and
Well,
defined.
she has that vivid red dress the first time we see her when she's a sort of a two-timing wife. And then by the end of the film, she's very pale and with a pale dress. Her color becomes less and less throughout the film. And here, a word for Grace Kelly. I thought she was a terrific actress. Just wonderful. I'm sorry she left and became royalty. I was a great fan of hers. Yeah, she
Why?
was. Yeah,
Why?
ma-
Why do you think that Hitchcock didn't think of Dial M as one of his major works? I mean, I was going through that Hitchcock Truffaut interview last week, the book, and Truffaut is eager to ask, and Hitchcock is like, well, this was. It doesn't say minor, but it didn't think. It didn't make it sound like it was as interesting to him as other work.
For him, it was an interesting technical experiment. He liked the challenge. But remember, Rope, which is set in one take,
Yeah,
basically, or seven takes,
similar. Yeah,
but
you're right.
masked, so it looks like one. He set this as a technical experiment, and once the experiment was completed, he was no longer invested in it. Something like Vertigo speaks to him at a deep personal level. It's about him and manufacturing and controlling women. But this film doesn't have that kind of psychological complexity, and it's a technical experiment. He solved it and he moved on. And because the 3D was finished at that point, he never made another 3D film. I think if 3D had lasted and this had been shown widely in 3D, he might have made other films in 3D and we might have had a longer period of 3D. I'm a huge fan. I saw the first 3D film in its world premiere engagement at the Paramount downtown. Um, Wanna Devil in November 30th, 1952.
So
And
contextualize a
but by
little.
by this time, look, November
Yeah,
30th, 1952. Then in 53, all the 3D films came out. By spring of 54,
they were
when
done.
this film was released, finished,
Yeah. Now
finished.
contextualize a little bit. How what prompted the fever of 3D? I mean, the stereoscopic image was already been worked on, but it's 51, 52, and with the Archobald film, Boana Devil, that there was the first feature, and then Hollywood kind of embraced it. Can you contextualize why it was this sudden and why so rapidly it faded?
Because the studios were in trouble. This profits were falling. They had to. Television came in. The subtitle of my book is "The Collapse of the Studio System: The Thrill of Cinerama and the Invasion of the Ultimate Body Snatcher." Television. Television was snatching bodies from theaters to living rooms. How do you get the people back? You give them something that they don't have at home. You didn't have 3D at home. They introduced Cinerama, which was much too large and cumbersome, but then CinemaScope and VistaVision and Todd AO, and those worked. We still see, thank goodness, I love the widescreen. We still see CinemaScope films. We call them Panavision now.
Panavision, yeah.
So there were ways of getting people back into the theater. Every studio jumped on the 3D bandwagon, but people didn't like 3D, and do you know 3D fails every time it's revived? It's not popular now either.
No, they had a moment when they thought they could do it because it's,
But
but
but my students complain, we don't like wearing glasses, or people used to say it gives you a headache. There's a surcharge now. It always fails in a commercial sense. So it's been revived 3 or 4 times, but it never catches on.
it was
But
also
they
it's
also thought, Julia, that the films were not putting their best foot forward. This is a classy film, but some of the films, Robot Monster, Catwomen of the Moon, not exactly A-level movies. So the studios shot themselves in their feet, in a way they didn't put their best foot forward. But there are really some good 3D films from the 50s, but they were released too late in the cycle. Kiss Me, Kate. That's really good in
House of
3D.
Wax. I love.
House of Wax was great.
Yeah,
Creature from the Black Lagoon,
creature.
which you're
Yeah,
showing here in May.
yeah.
Come back to see it. It's terrific.
But the first film, interestingly enough, the first feature, the Archobald or Buana Devil, was an independent filmmaker. It wasn't a studio that broke through in a
Hollywood
feature.
was very conservative and traditional. The moguls did not want to change their methods, so they were resistant to all the new technologies. But when Buana Devil broke all attendance records at the Paramount theaters in Los Angeles, did better business. I remember the line we had to wait on to get in. It did better business than any other film in the history of exhibition in LA. All the studios jumped on the 3D bandwagon. Every one of them. Jack Warner, Gerald Zanuck, everybody. They wanted to compete. And then the films, House of Wax, have you seen that in 3D? You didn't see it if you didn't see it in 3D, but okay. House of Wax was a bonanza,
Uh-huh.
but it was it was treated as a novelty, and people got tired of it. And I thought it's a gimmick, and once you've seen it, you've seen it. I don't feel that way. I feel 3D properly used enhances, charges, uh, it creates excitement for visual space. I think it enhances the experience of seeing a film. Wasn't this fascinating to see the composition in 3D, the layering and the technical complexity? It enhances the image.
You mentioned at the beginning that I mean, in several parts of the countries, the film was shown flat. It was shown in 3D, but also flat. There are technical challenges in projecting 3D because you have to have two interlocked at the time. Now it's digital, but you have to have two interlocked projectors in 35, and so you have to have the intermission.
That's
Is
why the
because
intermission.
they had to change. They had
You
to.
had two cameras and they had to be interlocked. And then they had to load two more cameras. But no theater had four cameras, so they had to have an intermission so that
Projectors, yeah.
the projectionists could do that. But I thought it added a classy touch for seeing a film with an intermission. That's sort of classy. It's worth the extra bit of money.
And another thing, which why it's probably it's less obvious, is that and why certain films are successful 3D and some other are not from a point of view of the language of the medium, is because it's not that easy to shoot. It didn't allow for fast movement. It didn't allow for a lot of cutting because it was complicated. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges of
You saw
filming?
that in this
Yeah.
film. There were long takes, which I love. Every now, um, thank you, Christopher Nolan. Every film is cut, 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 cut every split second. This film has long takes. How wonderful to have a long take and a continuous dialogue. But you couldn't cut a lot in 3D, and you notice there was very little movement. And when did you notice when they moved through a room, it could be a little blurred, so you didn't have clarity of movement in 3D. There were some technical restrictions at the time. It was a challenge for directors, a challenge that Hitchcock loved, and he passed the challenge. But you had to adjust the technique to the medium. There were things you couldn't do. A lot of cutting could be dizzying. Well, I got a headache when I saw Oppenheimer, so I can't stand all that fast cutting. I can't bear it.
But we don't agree on Avatar.
Avatar, I don't think it's good storytelling. The 3D is great.
Okay.
The 3D is great. It's not good storytelling, but 3D is great. Most films that you see in 3D today are not shot in 3D. They're 3D conversions.
Which means they're blown up. So
They're not shot in 3D.
Yeah, no.
They're and you can feel the fuzziness, and they don't have the clarity and the compositional elegance that this film has. I mean, it's the best made 3D film I've ever seen. I think it's a masterpiece of 3D. It's nobody's favorite Hitchcock film. It's talky. It's stagey. And if you can figure out all those keys, please explain it to me. Did anybody here understand which latch key went where? Because I was very bad in math, and that felt like a math problem, and I was not going to pass that test.
No, it's one of those things where the moment you think you have it figured out, and then you're like, you haven't.
Oh,
I'm going to open it to some questions. There is one right there. Oh, hold on for the mic.
Hi, thank you for being here. I assume the original. Hello?
Yeah.
I assume the original was red blue 3D.
no. That's anaglyphic.
Anaglyphic,
3D.
yeah. The red and green, but yeah, it's anaglyphic.
No. In the first run theaters, I always went to the Paramount downtown or the first run. You had wonderful projection. It was not red and green 3D.
Okay.
It was not.
So when you saw it tonight, was it the same? It was very stark. The 3D was extremely stark watching it. Same way in 1954.
A long time ago, my recollection is yes. What you saw tonight, beautifully done. Beautiful projection here at this theater.
There is something with the mic. Use
Something-
mine.
Something, mic went off. How am I now?
Yeah.
A little echoey.
Yeah.
I'm in 3D. Uh, but
Talking about the stark, the difference between what you saw in 54 and this one.
It's one of the reasons I wrote the book was to defend my decade, the 50s, from all the cliches and uh, disrespect that the decade has. And one of them was, oh, the 3D projection was bad. It was not. The 3D projection in the good first run theaters was almost, this was terrific, digital and enhanced, but it was very professional. It really was.
My point is, I think this is Dolby 3D.
Yes, it is Dolby 3D. The system, yeah.
Which is more stark than any prior 3D system, and as such, it almost detracts slightly from what you're seeing because it's such a bold 3D effect.
For me, it enhances it. But I know what you're saying. But for me, 3D, well done, enhances, boosts the image.
I mean, I've seen what you were referring before in terms of the red and green Yanaglyphic. That's a single strip. When you have a double strip 3D, which is 235s running together, is very sharp. I mean, it's very similar to this, especially when the color is so strong.
If it wasn't red green, it was polarized.
Yeah, yeah, it was polarized. Yeah,
It was polarized.
Polarized again is not quite as stark as
as possibly.
One of the things I remember from the period, because I loved movies as a kid, was when near the end of the cycle, when a film opened, it was, for instance, Kiss Me Kate, see it in 3D. It's exciting, it's wonderful. It didn't do very well in 3D. 2 weeks later, big ads, now you can see it without glasses. I was heartbroken. They did the same thing to poor Rita Hayworth in Miss Sadie Thompson. It opened at the Pantages for 3 weeks. The fourth week, they said, now see Rita in 3D. Now see Rita without glasses. Without glasses.
There is a question here. Has been.
What you're saying, his brilliance is, it wasn't just the foreground lights. He always was making it pristine.
Yes.
There was always something in the corner because he's a theater guy, and he sketches everything out. He only shot exactly what I shot, and he shot it from a low angle, but not so low. It's from my angle looking at you is the way this film was shot. It was not shot from typical here ever up.
No.
Sometimes when they were standing, but that's what made the film work, was because you felt like truly you were at a theater.
But didn't you feel you were in the room with them as well?
At a theater.
Yeah, but he wanted to replicate that experience, but it's deeply cinematic. This isn't a theater movie. It's a movie.
I disagree with that. It was exactly what theater does well, and you got the sense of it being real because it felt like the people were there, and when something went like that, it wasn't. I mean, that's what I felt. That he was going for. He's very successful as bringing theater to the screen.
But he changes his angle a lot. There are high angle shots and low angle shots and close ups and medium close ups. The camera position changes a lot.
Very few. He establishes very well all the dialogue situations. That light in the foreground. Watch the angles of how it's being shot. Those were the important things. Yeah, all the other stuff. I don't disagree with that. But he had established a theater on screen.
I think there was a question in the back. Yeah, he's been.
This is great, but for those of us who don't know, can you describe the process of how it's shot as opposed to a regular film?
The process of how this was shot as opposed to the regular
There
film.
were two cameras. There were two cameras, and they had to be set up in such a way that the images reflected each other. So actors had to be placed very carefully and within circumscribed positions. There was not a lot of freedom of movement. There was not. So he had to compensate for that by offering other things such as layering and depth. 3D is about two things: projection, emergence, they called it, with things coming out at you. Didn't you like the hand coming out when Grace Kelly is appealing, is calling us for help. But a lot of films used a lot of the projection, but the other way was depth.
I think that they're called the innies and the outies, right? The 3D, the innies is where they bring you into like this one, and
Yes.
when the other ones is where they come at you and they
Yes.
they come in the middle.
When you see Creature from the Black Lagoon here, water will come out of the screen and you'll feel like you're underwater.
Yeah.
So, and it will work very.
There is another
effectively.
question there.
I'm curious of your opinion of just kind of with the catch-22 of the main character and the femme fatale, of course. Do you think Hitchcock actually intended this to be kind of his classic film noir?
Well, it is a film noir. There's a crime and there's sort of a femme fatale. They remember he wouldn't have used that term in the 50s, most likely when he was making all his film noir. We call them film noir now, but Strangers on a Train is classic film noir. He would have called that a suspense picture or a thriller. But we use the term now, applying it to everything, things that it shouldn't even be applied to. But this is a film noir in color.
And it does have a stranger on the train moment where the the schoolmate comes in and there is the blackmail. So yes, it's the same.
Well, isn't that a beautifully acted
beautiful
scene?
scene. Beautiful scene.
Anthony Dawson, that actor's
Yeah.
terrific. But John Williams is fabulous. He walks away with the film as the detective.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Anyone else? One here. He's asking if you can tell him more about his book and the film that covers.
Yes. It is a comprehensive history of Hollywood in the 50s. It covers the studio system, it covers the new technologies, it covers method acting, it covers new directors, old directors, it covers genres, the ends of classical genres like original movie musicals and epic films and melodramas, and new genres like science fiction, which was brand new in the 50s. There had been no science fiction films before the 50s in America, believe it or not. So it's a widescreen treatment. I cover the waterfront. It's long. It took me a long time to write it, but I'm proud of it. It's the book I wanted to write.
Well, I hope you come. You come as
I'm
upstairs.
signing the book
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah, upstairs after we're finished here. But the book is amazing. It's also wonderfully structured because it starts with chapter devoted to how the main head of studios ended their career at the beginning of the 50s. They were actually fired, which is kind of funny if to read. Louis B. Mayer was fired.
Louis B. Mayer was fired in May 1951. That was the beginning of the end of the studio system and spelled trouble ahead for Hollywood. But while this period was under fire for so many different reasons, and I have a long section about the Blacklist, which you know about, of course, but I really did some homework on that and found out some things. The worst thing about the Blacklist period and that terrible HUAC investigation was when the committee asked the witnesses to name names of those who had been with them at communist meetings. And this is absolutely factual and it's horrifying. They knew every single name. They weren't getting any information from the witnesses. It was a way of humiliating and degrading them. Isn't that terrible? That an American congressional committee would do that to American citizens? Surprise, surprise. Could it happen again?
There is a question there.
Yeah, what format? You say it was 2 cameras side by side. So it's 2 rolls of 35 millimeter film.
Yes.
And how are you now projecting it? What do you have up here?
It's
It has to-
digital.
It has to be interlocked.
So it's been digitized up here.
Yeah, the right now what's made possible for us and for most theaters to show these classic films is the fact that they've become they've made them digital. They've been digitalized, and so it's a Dolby 3D process, and it's fortunate. I've projected. I brought in Italy actually double system 3D. We imported the lenses, and it's complicated. It's very complicated. So this makes it easier to bring back these films, which, you know, some of them are just, I mean, this is a masterpiece, but there are a lot of very good 3D.
Better than their
Yeah.
reputation. They're
Yeah,
worth
much
seeing.
better,
Yeah,
much
better
better,
than their
much better,
reputation. Yeah.
much better.
Is this a silver screen?
No,
You
this
don't
is
need
no,
one.
no,
You
for
don't need
Dolby
it.
you don't need it. No,
You don't need it.
no, you don't need it anymore. Before it was, you know, you needed a silver screen, so it's a big burden on theaters, and 35 is, you know, it's not available anymore. We have it, but I think the digitalization has made it possible for us to rediscover the film.
But when I've been doing programs around the country, the 3D films are really always a big draw. But 3D is still not a
No.
commercially successful entity. It still isn't.
No.
What do people have against it?
Well, I think it's also it's the glasses. It's like the subtitles as the glasses. You know, there is something in between you and the film. And I think also very few directors use it in a way that it's so creative that it's compelling, and so it's worth the effort, the extra $4, $5 that you know, a multiplex charges for you know, for seeing Toy Story in 3D or seeing it flat.
And the way 3D is used isn't enough of an extra dimension.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, I don't
But
think so.
it
It
but
could
the-
be. Yeah,
it could be.
Yeah.
It could be.
it could be. One more here. Tony,
Yes.
the
We're
mic.
talking about
Yeah.
Wim Wenders
Yeah.
and his
Yeah.
recent Anselm, which played here. Did some of you come to see it here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just that I think that he makes excellent use of
Excellent.
3D,
Excellent.
and not for effect, but really for telling the story. Like the Anselm Kiefer film, you never would have understood the scale of the work. And the film he did on Pina Bausch also, you know, it wasn't gratuitous in any way. So
I couldn't
Excellent
agree
question.
more. I think he does terrific 3D films, but he's not a big commercial American
no,
director.
it does
We
not
need a
address
big
that.
commercial
Yes.
director, but I hope Christopher Nolan doesn't get anywhere near 3D. But that's
He likes IMAX. He likes IMAX.
he likes
He likes
but then
IMAX.
he likes IMAX, and he uses nothing but close-ups in Oppenheimer. I felt overwhelmed by those close-ups.
One last one, and then we're going upstairs for the book signing.
Did you see the animated 3D, the Tim Burton Christmas Carol?
I did
And
not.
I May Be for Christmas, right?
It was excellent, actually.
Okay.
I had never seen a 3D animation before, and he pulled it off wonderfully, I thought.
Yeah.
No, I have not. I've not
And
seen that.
Pixar was also pretty good. Early Pixar for 3D, very creative. I think it's time to bring this upstairs. We're having a glass of rosé and his book signing, so please join us on the third floor. And thank you, Foster.